Good morning, everybody. Have you ever thought about who can vote? Well, that has changed over the years, from the very beginning, the Constitution, to modern times with 18-year-olds. And a dramatic event associated with who can vote happened on this date, June 18, in 1873, when Susan B. Anthony was fined $100 for trying to vote in the 1872 presidential election. When our country began, voting was pretty much limited to men who owned land or paid taxes. So the story of voting in our country's history has been one of expansion of the right to vote. What does the original Constitution say about voting? Not much. It basically says states can set up their own legislatures. And the 10th Amendment says that states have powers not given to the federal government. So it was understood as a state thing. An example, early on in 1792, New Hampshire eliminated the property requirement for voting. So this is an example of a state doing something. Another example was by 1810, most states had eliminated the requirement that you be a member of a church in order to vote. The separation of church and state is becoming a little clearer. So in 1848, when people met in Seneca Falls, New York, near the Finger Lakes, to talk about women voting, a disagreement came up on strategy. Some said we need to go state by state. Others said, no, we need a constitutional amendment. Another example of a state power in voting was in 1855, Connecticut established a literacy test. So you needed to show you could read or write a bit before you could vote. So when the Civil War came in 1861, many questions about democracy and the powers of the federal government and the powers of the state government were raised. Another question that was raised had to do with voting. If somebody fought, for instance, should they be able to vote? So when the Civil War ended, there were 3 amendments added to the Constitution. 13 got rid of slavery, 14 defined citizenship, and 15 gave black men the right to vote. And this is the first time male or female was used in the Constitution. The original Constitution simply said citizen or person. Another example of a state giving the right to vote was Wyoming, 1869, the first state to give women the right to vote. So here's the lineup for the election of 1872, Ulysses S. Grant and various other people. And it was in this election that Susan B. Anthony tried to vote. And she claimed that the 14th Amendment, which gave equal protection of the laws to all citizens, allowed her to vote. But she was denied that right by the judge. And on this date, June 18, in 1873, the next year, she was fined $100. But she never paid it because she thought that she had the right to vote. So during World War I, women worked in war factories and in other things related to the war. And there was a kind of an understanding that women really earned the right to vote after World War I. So 2 years after the war ended, in 1920, women got the right to vote, the 19th Amendment. So just like the Civil War led to the expansion of voting, World War I led to the expansion of voting. And in 1964, the 24th Amendment said no more poll taxes. So that was taking away some of the things some of the states had been doing. Well, when the Vietnam War got going in the 1960s, many of the soldiers were under 21. And this question of, hold it, you're old enough to die for your country, but you're not old enough to vote. That was addressed in 1971 when the 26th Amendment lowered the voting age to 18. So another example of a war leading to the expansion of voting. So I think we'd all agree there are certain things we cherish as Americans. The rights of the Bill of Rights would be an example. But certainly we all value that important right to vote.